Video games like Dying Light come along once in a blue moon, those games that come out of nowhere and revive a genre that seemed to be on its way out for the longest time. Prior to January 2015, zombie games had been on a steady decline. Zombies as a subgenre lost what made them so interesting. It felt like everyone was having a turn beating the zombified horse. You could still argue today that nothing has changed, because every year we get countless zombie game announcements. Though the constant cycle of zombie games continues, people still look back on Dying Light with great fondness. It really is remarkable that Techland managed to create one of the best zombie games in the last 10 years, considering about 4 years prior they made one of the most forgettable zombie games of all time. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what makes Dying Light so good. Everyone seems to have a different answer as to why they love the game. The parkour, the soundtrack, the combat, Raheem. No, it's definitely not Raheem. It really is a timeless classic when people have so many great things to say about it, and when they start to compare other zombie games to it. Yeah, it looks good, but it's not Dying Light though, is it? It's become one of those zombie games that is a pillar of the genre, proudly holding up and reminding everyone how goated zombie games are, even though most people are probably sick of them by now, but not me. I'm always open to the possibility of another great zombie game, but for now, I'll just sit here and ramble on about why Dying Light is really, really, really good. People who have never played Dying Light may just label it as that parkour zombie game, but people who have actually played the game know that it's so much more than this. Dying Light takes place in the fictional Middle Eastern city of Harran, where a mysterious virus has broken out, causing the entire city to be quarantined and shut out from the rest of the world. Sometime after the initial infection, the GRE, this universe's version of a dodgy pharmaceutical company, needs to get some documents back from a shady politician called Rise, as they may contain the means to curing the outbreak, so they decide to send in one GRE agent to get the documents back. I'm guessing the GRE must have been facing budget cuts, because why would you send in one guy to get documents that could save the world? We play as this lone agent called Kyle Crane, who is voiced by Roger Craig Smith, known for playing everyone's favourite Roidhead. After entering the city via parachute, Crane is attacked by a gang of thugs belonging to Rise. He narrowly avoids getting beaten to death by kindly telling the men to leave him alone, but he is soon bitten by a zombie and rescued by Jade and a fella I forget the name of because he dies 5 seconds later. Crane gets taken back to the tower. Here he meets some of the only people left alive in Harran who aren't bloodthirsty psychopaths, and is taught how to traverse around the city by Raheem. He agrees to help the survivors retrieve supplies like antizin, a drug that suppresses the zombie virus in infected individuals, which is dropped off every so often by the GRE. Wow, the GRE actually sounds really nice. But at the same time, Crane is reporting back to the GRE, who tell him to play along with the survivors, so they can learn about any new information on the documents. Oh Crane, you naughty little bugger. The plot follows Crane and his shenanigans as he tries to help the people in the tower, while at the same time working for the GRE and trying to gain favour with Rise. Most, if not all of the residents in the tower are incompetent. They are either itching to get themselves killed, or just stand around doing nothing all day. Yeah, don't worry guys, I'll go risk my life again. Most of the people you meet hold little importance to the story, but there are a few people who are actually useful. Raheem is the guy who teaches you the basics early on. Basics on parkouring, utilising your environment, and killing zombies, and also turns out to be the younger brother of Jade. Jade is the only other competent runner in the tower. Before Crane came along, she was practically carrying the tower on her back, with all the running around she was doing. Brecken is the leader of the tower, and a pretty incompetent one at that, shown by his bandaged head, which he got when one of Rise's goons bonked him and took his loot. Zia is the local scientist. He and his friend Dr. Camden, who is trapped in Old Town, are working towards a cure, but it's impossible to yield results as the signal is too weak between Old Town and the slums. This eventually leads to Crane tracking down Rise, who we see do a generic evil show of force, so we know he is a bad guy.
Very simple. Your right hand or your left? Left! Was that my left or your left?
See, what happened there was he did the opposite hand. That's how you know he's evil. Rise orders Crane to fix some radio towers, and in exchange he will give him some antizin, which the tower desperately needs as people are starting to turn.
There were cats in there! I froze. Lena had to step up. Maybe she should be in charge.
Crane's time spent in Harran is all about helping the locals, kind of like a missionary, but one who can not only repair radio towers and build safe houses, but also dive off buildings and whack zombies over the head with a flaming hammer. Though he starts out being kind of a dick, shown when he burns a shit ton of antizin because the GRE told him to, Crane more or less forgets this side of his character and becomes a full-blown superhero to the people of Harran. The base game consists of two main areas, the slums and Old Town. I'll focus on the slums for now, as Old Town comes later in the game. Dying Dying Light's gameplay revolves around two defining mechanics, combat and parkour. These two mechanics are the base for everything the player can do in Dying Light. A massive reason as to why Dying Light is so timeless is because of its focus on your freedom to move around the map in a number of different ways. Techland clearly saw potential in the idea of making movement mechanics that weren't just necessary, but fun at the same time. I mean, they even spoke to the OG of parkour, David Bell, so they were clearly taking the idea very seriously. Parkour unlocks a whole new dimension to Dying Light. Without it, there's no way the game would have been as memorable as it was. People don't enjoy Dying Light for the lovable characters after all. Techland's previous zombie outing, Dead Island, proves this. Both games are similar in the sense that they are zombie survival games where the player must level up and craft weapons to fight against all manner of undead freaks, but Dying Light feels so much more open thanks to the movement, and it's just a better game overall. Most of the buildings you see in the game can be scaled, giving not just a sense of freedom, but also a sense of scale to Harran. Think about how unremarkable the setting of Dying Light would have been if you were stuck on the ground all the time. Yeah, you'd still get some enjoyment out of fighting infected, but it wouldn't be long before you got bored and promptly uninstalled the game. Parkour unlocks so many missions and activities that couldn't be done with a simple movement system. Of course, Dying Light doesn't just want you to use movement to get from A to B and to run away from enemies. It goes back to that well-known saying, sometimes the best defense is a swift kick to the head. The combat of Dying Light is elevated so much by the movement system. Hacking and slashing zombies is fun, but what's even more satisfying is sweeping the legs from underneath them. The game offers you a whole skill set you can use to kick, barge, and snap zombies, turning Crane into a deadly weapon. Not so fast though, partner. You've got to earn it first. Like a lot of games, Dying Light has a level up system that you can put skill points into that make Crane stronger. Skill trees are pretty self-explanatory, but Crane has 4 skill trees. These trees are Survivor, Agility, Power, and Legend. The Survivor tree grants the player supporting abilities that make your time in Harran a little easier, like granting you blueprints for new gadgets, access to new equipment like the goated grapple hook, and the ability to hold more stuff. The Agility tree gives Crane access to more physical abilities, as well as improving basic movements and health. Power is all about how effective your weapons are. This tree upgrades Crane's strength, allowing you to perform deadlier strikes with weapons, and even grants you the most overpowered tool in the game, the Stomp Attack. Got a zombie tanking all your hits? No problem, just push him to the ground and have your boot kiss his forehead. The Legend skill tree grants you abilities that really tip the balance in your favour. Well, at least I think they do. You have to reach max rank with one of the other trees to unlock it, and I haven't because I'm shit at the game. These upgrades and new moves really make you feel like a force of nature, and you'll need all of them to face the ugly bastards you'll be fighting / running away from. The weapons you use to kill the undead and tools to keep yourself alive don't just spawn out of thin air. You either have to find them or craft them, or you can just buy them. You will constantly have to loot every house and container you find to acquire precious materials. Materials can be used to craft items like medkits, molotovs, and lockpicks, and you're going to need a lot of these because Dying Light's gameplay is split, with 10% of the gameplay being parkour and the other 90% being dedicated to lockpicking doors and crates. Looting is also great for finding weapon mods and even blueprints for sicker, more unhinged weaponry like flaming swords and electric hammers. Vendors can be found all around Harran, offering you all kinds of weapons and equipment, but for some reason, even after society has collapsed, they want money from you. What are you going to spend that $200 on I just gave you, mate? Going to go to the local corner shop or an Aldi? Apart from completing missions in the story, Crane can do a number of other side activities to help keep his mind off the annoying knobheads in the tower by talking to other knobheads outside of the tower and completing parkour challenges. These activities are crucial for getting your level up, and you're going to need every precious skill point you can get your hands on, because outside of every safe zone there's a shit ton of zombies waiting for you. The undead of Dying Light range from being not too hard to beat, to being fairly challenging, to being really annoying. There's quite a large variety of infected that all require different approaches and levels of caution. Most of the streets are filled with regular biters, the slow shambling main force of the undead army. Though they're slow, they can tank several hits from even your most powerful weapons, and in large numbers they can easily overwhelm you. These also come in their own variety of flavours, with some carrying gas tanks on their backs, and some who give off a nasty green cloud of BO. Virals are freshly infected individuals that retain immense speed and ferocity as they charge the player down, and are even able to scale buildings. What's even creepier about these guys is that sometimes when they're attacked, they plead for the player to stop. Yep, that's not terrifying at all. Dying Light tends to get pretty dark sometimes, as shown again by the Screamers. Screamers are infected children who, as the name suggests, scream out when the player gets too close to them, alerting all nearby infected to your location. While Dying Light is dark, it also gets pretty weird with its infected, like with the toads. Toads are horrible bastards that spit acid at you, and they're really annoying. Even Crane isn't impressed by them.
I'm shouting because this fucked up infected motherfucker with guts hanging out of his mouth just spit a bunch of toxic snot at me.
Goons are muscular biters that lug around massive tools, which they slam to the ground, inflicting large area damage. How they got this name? I guess we'll never know. But we do know why bolters got their name. It's because they're fast buggers that run away from you. One of the most devastating infected in the game is the bomber. These guys are walking bombs that completely catch you off guard as they tend to stand right behind doors. Seems too convenient to me. Demolishers are Dying Light's tankiest enemies. On top of being huge hulking beasts, they also have body armor, which makes them really frustrating to deal with. Each of these zombie variants adds a unique dynamic to the game and forces the player to think on their feet. Despite the challenges they bring, the zombies can be beaten, and you have all your tools in your arsenal to get the job done, whether that's simply avoiding them or actually fighting them head on. The undead of Harran don't stand a chance against Crane. It's at this point that you start to get the hang of Dying Light. Securing safe zones and clearing out hordes becomes second nature. You may even be thinking to yourself that this game is a piece of piss. Yeah, it's pretty easy, I could run around here all day long. Oh, I didn't realise there was a day and night cycle. I wonder if anything's going to change gameplay wise. Oh god. Like I said before, there's many reasons why Dying Light is very popular, but I did forget to mention another reason, and that's that it has one of the most iconic and feared special infected types to exist in a zombie game, the Volatile. Volatiles completely change the dynamic and tone of the game, turning it from a fairly challenging adventure to a flat-out survival horror, and this all happens when it turns dark. The nighttime aspect of Dying Light offers a completely different experience to the daytime, so much so that XP points are doubled when travelling around at night, and when completing activities. Nothing takes the wind out of your sails quite like the sun setting in this game and watching these angry Doritos stalk you around the map. Fighting these guys is almost always the wrong decision. They are faster and deadlier than any other infected in the game and can only be scared off by your UV torch or when hiding in a safe area. This is why volatiles are such a great addition to Dying Light. When an enemy makes the very idea of going outside during the night so daunting, you know you've got yourself an impressive enemy. Volatiles also test your knowledge of parkour mechanics too, as you have to be perfect if you want to get away from them. Despite volatiles being so scary, they can be beaten if you know what to do, and if you have an assault rifle handy. When you're not being chased by these rabid sentient scabs, the night aspect of Dying Light has its own challenges for you to beat. Quarantine zones hold tons of valuables left over when the military decided to close these areas of Harran. Crane can't read, so he can just slip past these do not enter signs and wander into these quarantine zones that are full of high-end loot and a lot of infected. You can't talk about Dying Light without glazing the soundtrack. The music of Dying Light is known for being unique for a zombie game. It takes a lot of inspiration from classic 80s scores, incorporating synth into many of its tracks. The soundtrack alone gives Dying Light a lot of personality, hitting home not just how dire the situation is in Harran, but it also captures the epic scale of the game. Each track fits into the game so perfectly as well. The dramatic songs heighten the tension between characters, the music when you're getting chased is terrifying, and the atmospheric songs create a lot of atmosphere. After a while of helping the locals and dicking around, Crane and Jade decide to raid a school that Rise is using as a warehouse, believing there might be some antizin in there and come across some explosives. After getting them back to the tower, Raheem comes up with a plan to blow up a nearby volatile nest, as it will make going outside during the nighttime a lot easier. Jade makes Crane promise her that he won't let Raheem go to the nest, even though she is his older sister and Crane is just some random guy. Raheem takes no notice, however, and takes the explosives along with a guy called Omar to blow up the nest. Unsurprisingly, everything goes horribly wrong, and Raheem asks Crane to come help him. When Raheem is too hurt to continue, he asks Crane to go plant the bomb in the hive, as he's already started the timer. Crane blows up the hive and comes back to help Raheem,
Oh shit!
only to find that he was bitten and has turned.
You goddamn stupid fucking kid!
Props to Roger Craig Smith for some top tier voice acting, but honestly I didn't really care for Raheem at all, and that's because we barely got to know the guy, which unfortunately is the case with a lot of the characters in this game. Crane and Brecken have a heart to heart and Jade overhears their conversation.
Oh no. Jade, wait!
Oh, don't look at me like that, love. He's your brother. You should have looked after him. Things really start to fall apart for the survivors, as Dr. Zia's group are killed and he is taken prisoner by Rise. Crane murks a bunch of his men but is apprehended and taken to the pit. Here Rise gives another villainous speech, but Crane quickly shuts him up. After surviving waves of undead and a big angry boy, Rise decides to come finish him off himself, but not before revealing that the GRE were trying to weaponize the virus. An evil corporation weaponizing a virus? No, can't be. Rise's second Joker speech is interrupted when Crane cuts his hand off. From here, he makes his escape, but not before comforting the dying Doctor's ear. Crane puts his ninja warrior skills to the test and makes it out of there in one piece, but starts to have seizures. The infection in his body is starting to spread again, and with no answers in, he has to find a way into Old Town to unite with Dr. Camden so he may continue Dr. Zia's research. Jade's already managed to get through to Old Town thanks to a group called the Saviors. The Saviors? Oh, I'm sure they're a trustworthy group of individuals. Jade and Crane still aren't on squeaking terms, so Crane has to try and convince them to give him passage into Old Town. Luckily, they're convinced to help Crane by what he did to Rise. That turns out to be complete bollocks because waiting for you on the other side is a Rise ambush.
Savior's my ass.
Being so far away from the slums makes Crane homesick, so he makes friends with Troy and her band of runners, who are held up in Ember's tower. Here, Crane and Troy come up with plans to help out the locals and find a way to get to Dr. Camden before the government decides to bomb the city. Entering the second part of the game gives the player access to Old Town, a brand new location that differs slightly compared to the slums. Obviously, the gameplay mechanics of Dying Light don't change between the two locations, but some of them are definitely heightened. Old Town is the wealthier part of Harran. Unlike the buildings in the slums that are fairly low to the ground and tend to break underfoot, Old Town's entire district is full of tall, often beautifully crafted buildings which almost evolve the parkour aspect of the game. Old Town feels like it was designed around the grapple hook mechanic, as the tall architecture allows for longer and more fluid jumping. Though parkouring is a key mechanic throughout the whole of Dying Light, it does feel like you are encouraged to do it a lot more in Old Town. I also wanted to talk about the side quests in the game, or at least the ones that stood out to me. On the surface, Dying Light may just seem like another zombie action game, but it gets really dark at times, both literally and figuratively. The side quests of Dying Light highlight themes of despair, desperation, and greed, and show off the sort of shitty behaviour that would be rampant in a society plagued by zombies. Like the guy who claims he needs alcohol for his wife who's giving birth, and makes Crane go on multiple runs to get him several bottles of booze, only for Crane to discover that he's just throwing a party for his friends. Another side quest involves Crane checking out a distress signal at a local fan zone, with the voice claiming that they are willing to trade for food and medicine. It turns out just to be a serial killer who is luring survivors there to kill them and loot their belongings. Lovely. There's even a corrupt city worker who keeps the location of vital supplies a secret, only agreeing to tell Crane where they are if Crane can get him a master key so he can carry out some fraudulent behaviour.
Fraud department? Yes, please.
After Crane does what he's told, the knobhead betrays Crane anyway, but he's obviously no match for this resident zombie-killing lunatic. Some side quests aren't mean-spirited, but are rather pretty tragic, like the one where an old man has to look after a bunch of kids until his wife gets home, but we later discover that his wife is down in the basement and has been a zombie for a long time, as the husband couldn't work up the courage to kill her himself. Or when Crane is asked to find a boy's missing brother, only to find out it was actually the boy's dog, who had also been murdered by the next door neighbour. Despite all of this horrible shit, it's not all doom and gloom. Some side quests are a bit goofy, like when you have to work for these two twins who outright insult Crane to his face multiple times.
That's equal to several large rocks. He's American. The metric system makes him angry.
Or when you have to find some shisha parts and meteor fragments for the local crackhead, who claims the infection was caused by aliens, and thanks you for your help with a ray gun. It's these side quests that I honestly find way more interesting and thought-provoking than the main narrative. I'm not saying that trying to find a cure for Harran wasn't an interesting plot, but there weren't many interesting characters besides Crane and Rise, despite the game pushing the likes of Raheem and Jade onto us. Speaking of Jade, she is still mad at Crane for her brother dying, even though Raheem was a living, breathing human being who could make his own decisions, and Crane makes matters worse by finally revealing he was working for the GRE, and Jade takes this new information really well. Since Rise leaked the GRE's plans to weaponize the Harran virus, the government now believes there are no survivors left in Harran, and see this as an excuse to firebomb the city. Never understood how we leaked the files. I always figured the internet access wasn't a thing in Harran since the outbreak. Couldn't Rise or anyone else just sent an email out to get help? That's when Embers and Crane come up with a plan to create a controlled explosion to get attention from the outside world. This plan doesn't get a chance to bloom, however, as a fighter jet blows the building up, so no footage of the pattern will exist. It's not all bad news though, as Jade decides to forgive Crane and meet up with him. Guess things are finally looking up for Crane. Oh, never mind, she's been kidnapped. Rise has taken Jade to the museum, and the only way Crane can get there without getting his head blown off is by swimming through the flooded tunnel system. Once Crane is done battling Rise's forces, you find Jade, who has unfortunately been bitten, and with Crane about to turn as well, Rise forces the pair to make a tough decision: who will get the dose of antacin and who will be forced to turn. Crane takes matters into his own hands and goes to inject Jade, but he has a massive seizure, sending him into a weird dream sequence that comes out of nowhere. I get that it's supposed to be a hallucination, but it just ruins the flow of what's happening. Although it does give us a chance to see Amir again. Amir, remember him? The one who got himself killed in the first 5 seconds of the game?
While I blamed you for Amir's death, I wanted to kill you.
But I just want you to know that I don't blame you. Amir knew the risk.
Make your mind up, love. Do you blame him or not? Crane awakens to find himself strangling Jade, only stopping once the antizin has suppressed the infection. Rise sends in some of his goons to finish Jade and Crane off, which gives us one of the coolest and most disturbing sequences in the game. Crane reluctantly puts Jade out of her misery and creepily rubs her face. Not sure why Techland attempted to forge a romance between the two, considering they spend little time together. Goodbye, lady I only knew for a couple of days. Crane doesn't have time to grieve as he must restore power to a local radio tower in the pissing rain to stop the military from bombing the city. Jade was supposed to get Zia's research to Dr. Camden, which she can't do because she's dead, so Crane must bring the research there himself. This meeting with Dr. Camden reveals a lot of interesting plot points, like how Amir was the guy who helped Dr. Camden reach his lab. Camden also reveals that Rise was his bodyguard who went a bit mental when his brother died.
Rise went from a guy with monstrous tendencies to a full-blown monster.
You can say that again. Once Camden has the samples, Crane must make a final call to the GRE to let them know a cure is finally possible. Only who's on the other end of the phone?
Kyle Crane, you can hear me, can you not?
Rise.
Turns out Rise knows about Crane's plan and has been listening to his calls the entire time. This is the final straw for Crane, who outright says to Rise that he will kill him. The climax of Dying Light has it all: a scary volatile chase sequence, an intense parkour segment that tests all of your skills and knowledge of the game's mechanics, and a shitty QuickTime event boss fight. What more could you ask for? Crane manages to subdue Rise and give him the Batman treatment. So you're gonna kill all of his underlings no problem, but the main bad guy you're just gonna let live. That is a big brain move, Crane. It's such a big brain move that it nearly comes back to bite him as Rise manages to get the upper hand on him until Crane rips a knife out of his own arm and stabs Rise in the neck with it.
Let's ask for a decision, asshole!
Wow, that was sick. Crane tells the GRE to do one and says he'll decide what to do next. Dr. Camden radios in delivering good news that a cure may be possible. The narrative of Dying Light ends on a somewhat positive note that suggests there may actually be hope for this doomed city after all. Then The Following came along and changed this whole idea forever. Dying Light The Following is an expansion to the original game, which was released in 2016, just over a year after the base game came out. Set some time after the events of Dying Light, life at the tower is falling apart for the residents, who are quickly running through the last doses of antizin. With more and more sick people coming in and no more new antizin drops falling from the sky, Kyle and Lena become desperate to try and find a solution to their growing problem. Luckily, a dying man comes along and starts babbling about a way out of Harran and a mysterious cult that can apparently make you immune to the virus, and because Crane is the only runner who's capable of actually doing anything, he goes on a mission to see this cult for himself. Crane is once again a stranger in a strange land, where he is seen as an outsider by the people who live in the countryside of Harran, and has to prove himself to this mystical cult in order to gain an audience with the leader of the group, the Mother. The Following is regarded as a great expansion to the main game, and this is an opinion I very much share. On top of being a great send-off to Dying Light's story, at least at the time, it brings so many new mechanics to the table that completely flip the status quo of what was previously established. Crane arrives at the outskirts of Harran, and the game immediately establishes that you are on your own.
He died this morning, Kyle. The fever got him. You're on your own, I'm afraid.
It's never established what happened to Brecken. Perhaps he was too busy kicking or throwing something. Classic Brecken. Crane manages to find some semblance of life when he comes across a community of survivors, though they aren't too happy to see him there. After getting the cold shoulder from the leader Jazir, Crane talks to local salesman and shady character, Khan.
Freaks.
Who tells him that to get around the vast countryside, he'll need more than his parkour skills. He'll need some wheels, which Crane acquires from some less than friendly bandits. After getting back to the farm, Crane has to chat with the resident edgelord, Ezgi, who tells Crane he needs to start doing some good before the people around here will start listening to him. Oh, I'm sure you've done your bit, Ezgi. What's your job? Stand around brooding and listening to Limp Bizkit all day? Crane decides to make a difference and helps get the water supply back online. All he had to do was ask these bandits nicely. See? That wasn't so hard. This act of kindness gets him noticed by the Children of the Sun, which sets him down a path he can't turn away from for the rest of the game. A major mechanic of The Following are the Children of the Sun themselves. This group has dedicated their lives to helping those in the surrounding countryside, as they have the means to deter the undead. Kyle Crane must prove to the cult that he is a helpful individual who is dedicated to their cause, and he does this by working through their ranks. The following introduces the level of trust. Each time Crane does some good in the world, like help secure a safe zone or help a nearby family, his trust gauge will increase and the Children of the Sun will take note of this. Crane must improve his level of trust over the course of the game to gain access to quests with the cult and progress the story. It's a great feature that works mechanically and thematically. Gameplay wise it's good as it encourages you to check out all the great side content in the following, like the side quests, and it fits within the story because there's no way a secret cult would let an outsider like Crane just waltz into the gang without earning his place. The goal is to reach Disciple, the ultimate level of trust that will allow you to speak with the cult members directly, even giving Crane a chance to talk to the mother.
Hey baby.
Upon first glance you can see just how different the following setting is compared to the slums and Old Town from the base game. Apart from being very rural and green, there's a lot of open space to run around and explore, with smaller towns and structures being scattered around the map. Now on paper that sounds completely anti-Dying Light. The game built a reputation for allowing you to use parkour and high-rise buildings to escape from threats. How am I going to get away from volatiles if I'm just running through a field? Oh, okay. Since the map is way bigger with large open spaces of grass, water, and cornfields, it made sense to give Crane some form of transportation, which comes in the form of his buggy. Arguably the most popular new feature in the following. The buggy is essential for getting to different regions of the map. Though you are free to walk, I wouldn't recommend doing that, especially at night. It's a pretty exciting proposition having a car, zipping around the map and running over any zombies that stand in your way. Your buggy even has its own skill tree, letting you deck it out with tougher armor, a nitro blast, and even droppable weapons like mines that can kill anything that may be pursuing you. You gain skill points by leveling up, which occurs when you kill zombies, complete jumps, or when you just simply drive around. Yeah, it's a pretty nifty tool, but it isn't invincible. Not only does your buggy require fuel to keep it chugging along, certain parts of it can become damaged. This adds another element to looting, as now you need to keep your eyes peeled for broken down cars, which contain things like fuel and screws you need to repair your buggy. It's another necessary feature because it stops you from getting too complacent while driving around and smashing into zombies. The following offers much of the same with what it lets you do. There's still safe zones to bring back online, NPCs to talk to, but the countryside of Harran brings horrifying surprises of its own. Keeping in line with the buggy, one of the NPCs comes up with the idea to host races for the survivors and asks Crane to take part in it. The point being that people deserve to have a little bit of fun in these tough times. They're not really races, more like speed challenges, like the parkour challenges found in the slums and Old Town. The standard infected you encounter in Dying Light are bad enough, but somehow Techland managed to throw in another curveball in the form of freaks of nature. Sitting and lurking in certain areas of the map are extremely powerful enemies that can do devastating damage to you if you aren't careful. A lot of them are also massive bullet sponges, so you need a great deal of patience to take them down. Oh, and a shit ton of throwing knives. The threat of volatiles is one that looms over you throughout the entirety of Dying Light. They make travelling around in the dark a bumhole clenching experience, but the following decided to let players get their own back on these ugly bastards. Volatile nests are scattered around the map and can be destroyed to please the Children of the Sun, but doing so requires a lot of courage and patience, as these nests are often full of infected. Also, don't bother attempting to destroy them during the day, because there'll be a shit ton of volatiles waiting inside for you. The side quests of the following offer up more great small contained stories that help make Harran feel more interesting. Most of the NPCs continue to be shitty people, and it doesn't just stop at crooked old men either, as one side quest has you investigate a distress call from some kids, only to find out they've lured you into a trap to feed their friend, Big Guy. There was one side quest in particular that stuck with me because of how messed up and shocking it was to stumble upon. Jazir tells Crane that their local root farmer, Sabit, has gone missing, meaning survivors have lost access to life-saving herbs. When tracking down Sabit's home, you find the little hut empty of herbs and Sabit himself. Upon further investigation, there's a sinkhole in the middle of the hut, and when going down in there, you realise it leads straight into a volatile nest. At this point, you can just find the herbs and leave, but choosing to go further into the nest reveals that Sabit has begun transforming into a volatile. This is creepy enough, but what makes it worse is that he still seems to be conscious. Not all of the side quests are so scarring though. The twins make a return and Crane can have some more fun adventures with them as they continue to call him an idiot and drive a train through a brick wall. Once Crane has done enough to get noticed by the cult, he's invited to witness the miracle drug that keeps zombies at bay. Though it sounds like some bullshit Nigel West Dickens would try and sell to you, it actually works. The Children of the Sun are able to deter zombies with this magical blue mist, and Crane is able to feel its effects, to the point where he can hear the mother talking to him directly. Many of the survivors around the countryside claimed that despite being infected, their belief in the mother has kept them from turning.
You're talking bullshit.
And now Crane, seeing this to be true, informs Lena of his findings.
Lena? Hello? Shit.
Well, he tries to. After working for the cult for a while, they reveal to Crane that the blue mist is not some spiritual cure, but just some drug they found lying around, and much like antizin, it just suppresses the infection. But they believe a cure is possible, and ask Crane to assist an old man named Attila, who is heavily involved with the mother. Attila explains to Crane that the children of the sun believe in a prophecy of a chosen one who will rise up and vanquish the plague from Harran. Crane continues to help both the children of the sun and Attila, who tells him to grab a very important ritual mask from an abandoned ceremony pit. Attila then gets ready to prepare his research for Crane to help the children of the sun, and by research, I mean off himself in his basement so the sun god will inhabit his body. Plot twist, it didn't. He's dead as shit, so Crane has to check out a lighthouse all by himself, and discovers that his old friend Khan, who he met only twice before throughout the entire game, is actually the leader of what remains of Rise's men. These guys also have some of the last vials of the magical medicine Crane needs to save his friends at the tower, so after gathering up the blue goo, Crane heads to the dam as the bandits are going to destroy it, along with the mother. Crane Mario Karts his way to the dam and arrives at the point of no return. Inside the dam is a complete massacre. Faceless followers and bandits have been strung about the place, torn apart by either each other or something else entirely. Blue mist fills the room and Crane can hear the mother talking to him, only she's nowhere to be seen. Instead, she is talking to him telepathically. Apparently smoking enough blueberry vape can let you do that. Crane finally reaches the mother and reveals that when she was in the darkness, she brutally killed the survivors she was with. That's weird, that sounds like something a volatile would do. Oh my god. The mother turns out to be a sentient volatile, who transformed after drinking the blue liquid Crane believes is the cure. She explains to Kyle that in the sun, she remains in control, but once the sun sets, she gives into her new nature as a killing machine. The code given to Crane by Attila, yeah, he gave Crane a code, I forgot to mention that earlier, turned out to be a launch code for a missile that the mother wants to launch, and needs Crane to help her. Her mindset being that in order to save the world, Harran must be destroyed, and the game actually gives you a choice between blowing up the city or saving your friends, and the canon ending is that Crane ignores the mother and has a 1v1 with her. She force feeds him some of that blue shit so they can have a good old fashioned scrap. Once he defeats the mother, Crane makes for the exit, yet continues to hear the voice of the mother echoing in his head. Crane's seizures make a return. This time though, they're incredibly more potent, forcing him to the floor. Crane makes it out of the dam and out of Harran altogether, seeing a bus drive past and a family playing in the park. He goes to introduce himself but is startled by a scream from one of the children. Well, it turns out Crane has turned into a sentient volatile himself, and when the sun sets, he's forced to give into his new nature. For Dying Light to end this way is so messed up in a number of ways, especially for Crane. He started out as a guy with selfish intentions, working for a shady organisation, but then slowly grew into the hero of the story, doing everything in his power to save his friends and find a cure, only to go and piss all that down the toilet when he inadvertently spread the virus outside of Harran and doomed humanity. Oh well, at least now we know he's still alive. Replaying this game has got me even more hyped for the Beast, and I can't wait to see who and what Crane will encounter. Perhaps he'll find some old friends, maybe Brecken or Lena, as long as it's anyone but Esgy.